Welcome to The Debrief. I'm back with The Hill's editor-in-chief, Bob Cusack. Good to see you, Bob.
Hey, Robby.
All right, let's get into a developing story. Thursday, the House GOP announced an investigation into the Biden family focused on whether the president was directly involved in his son's business dealings and whether or not he's compromised. Let's listen to some of their press conference.
Here's the thing. Hunter Biden isn't this innocent guy that just got a bad rap because he had a drug problem. And the Republicans don't need to waste any time on Hunter Biden. We're not trying to prove Hunter Biden is a bad actor. He is. If anybody wants to disagree with that, then there's nothing we have to talk about. Our investigation is about Joe Biden. And we already have evidence that would point that Joe Biden was involved with Hunter Biden on his deal. So we want the bank records. And that's our focus. We're trying to stay focused on, was Joe Biden directly involved with Hunter Biden's business deals? And is he compromised? That's our investigation.
And I think it's also important to understand, never forget how this story has changed. I mean, think about this. When it started off, it was, no, it's not his laptop. It's not his laptop. Then it was, well, it's his laptop, but remember, it's Russian disinformation and no one did anything wrong. Then it was, well, maybe he did something wrong, but President Biden didn't know about it. And now it's, well, maybe President Biden knew about it and was involved, but it didn't influence his decisions. In fact, yesterday, there was a story in Politico which said that. The story in Politico yesterday, investigating the investigators, Dems strategists to launch counterpunch to House GOP. Story in Politico yesterday, here's what it said in there. Quote, no evidence has publicly emerged that Joe Biden's decisions were affected by his son's business dealings.
So that was Representative Jim Jordan. Previously, that was Representative James Comer, who are going to be looking at Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and everything going on there. Obviously, this is something Republicans really explicitly campaigned on, talk about an awful lot on conservative media, their desire to probe what links, if any, there are between Joe Biden and Hunter Biden's business dealings.
Yeah, I mean, Robby, you're going to have at least two committees looking into this. Yeah, you mentioned Comer. He's going to be heading the Oversight Committee, and then Jim Jordan heading the Judiciary Committee. For now, they're getting along. Usually there are turf battles on investigations, but they kind of divided it up. And I think it's very interesting that Comer is saying, hey, listen, we're not going after Hunter Biden. This is about the president and what were the international deals that went on. I think he's got to keep this under control, though, and House Republicans don't, I think, want this to be the face of their new majority. I think they want to focus on bread and butter issues, the economy, inflation, while also doing investigations. And even though it's a slim majority, as Kevin McCarthy says, the gavels are not small, medium, large. They get the same size. So the investigations are coming, and it's going to be interesting to see the White House. Do they cooperate? Do they say, okay, we have nothing to hide, we'll give you all this information? Or do they not?
Yeah, that is going to be a key question for how they decide to handle this. This is obviously an issue that animates so much of the conservative base, I think, are very interested in this issue.
Yeah.
So it would be impossible for them to do nothing on it. They promised, they campaigned, they said they were going to do this.
Yes.
So this is not out of left field. They said explicitly these investigations and then looking at Fauci and
withdrawal in Afghanistan.
Yep. So those things have to happen. But I think you're right that there are many Americans for which these are some of the issues forefront of their minds, but they're right. They're not. It's not the economy. It's not the bread and butter issues.
Yeah, and when you do an investigation, I think it's always good to say, okay, we're going to look into this and see what we find, not prejudge what happened. And I think that's what House Republicans have to be careful on. More in the media have been doing stories on Hunter Biden and his international dealings, and so, but they do have to make sure this does not become kind of like a Benghazi investigation.
Right. Although the trajectory here has been quite favorable to Republicans in a way, because we started from the absolute bottom of don't even look at this story because it's misinformation and it's a Russian plant.
Right.
And to now where we are, which is learning that there are some questions about how the FBI handled this.
And I think it's important for House Republicans to talk about those individual questions that need to be answered, because Democrats are going to say, this is just a partisan witch hunt.
Yeah. Well, turning to the elections, as Senator Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker head to a December runoff, Democrats are reportedly hoping that big names like former President Barack Obama can help put Warnock over the top. Over the top once again. He got close to the top, but not over it last time. So clearly, Democrats have to be coming into this thinking, what we did worked. How do we repeat? How do we run the same play?
Yeah, and Obama is the perfect closer for Democrats. And then, of course, then the question is, are we going to see Trump in Georgia between now and the runoff? And I think probably not. But at the same time, Democrats are feeling good, and this would be the cherry on top. This is not going to decide Senate control. They already have that. But picking up that seat would be huge. And honestly, I would give Warnock, I think he's a slight favorite. I think Republicans are dispirited by what happened, and they may not show up. And if you have Obama saying, you've got to show up for this, I think they'll show up.
I think I agree with you. Republicans have to be feeling so upset about so many races that did not go their way, which is going to give Warnock a kind of incumbency, then a default incumbency advantage. I know Brian Kemp was doing some campaigning for Herschel Walker. Now, obviously, Brian Kemp successful, reelected by a wide margin.
No runoff for him.
No runoff for him. Can he, translate the enthusiasm that clearly voters had for him? Voters voted for him and not for Herschel Walker. They split their ticket, or they left the ballot blank after him.
He's going to go all out, but I don't think it's going to be as good for Republicans because he's not on the ballot. And now, this is a close race no matter what, and this is not going to be a 7-point win or either way. It's going to be tight. So what happens between now and early December matters. But we've seen some bad headlines for Herschel Walker. They'll probably continue. So I think Republicans really have to adopt a different strategy than they adopted in the midterms.
Clearly, early December. That's going to be tomorrow. It's going to be over before we have any time to change course. Well, meanwhile, Senator Warnock has joined a lawsuit that was filed by the Georgia Democratic Party and the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. At the center of this lawsuit is a 2021 change to the Peach State's voting laws. So what's the deal here?
Well, people would be able to vote, according to this lawsuit, they should be able to vote the Saturday after Thanksgiving. But there's a law that says, well, there's a holiday provision in there. So initially, Kemp was indicating people can start to vote on that Saturday. And of course, weekend voting is a big deal, especially for Democrats. So I think this is going to have to be settled in the courts. And that's what Kemp says. He's like, we shouldn't settle this in the courts. They did pass a law in between the last runoff and 2 runoffs back then and this one. And I think legally, probably Kemp is on the solid ground. But at the same time, it's going all out to win this seat. So I'm not surprised that this lawsuit was filed.
We're still waiting. Well, it's been called the Kerry Lake race, obviously, in Arizona. I think there's still some races that haven't been called. There was one that's real close in Arizona that hasn't been called. I think it's the Attorney General race is still.
And several House races still.
It's are Republicans going to continue to talk about? I'm hearing a lot about this whole the elections not being one day, being a month long, taking forever. What we saw in Nevada and Arizona, and it's talking about not the same way they were talking about in 2020, where Trump was pushing candidates to say it was fraud, it was stolen, but questions are being asked. Is that going to be part of just how Republicans talk about elections?
I think it's a valid question of why some states are better at counting votes than others. I mean, why not look into that and say, can we improve the system so we can, find out? I mean, this is the United States of America. Do we have to wait weeks? Perhaps for some of these close races? I mean, some of these races, even 2 days later, only like 54% were in. I know you have a lot of people, not voting on Election Day. It's different, especially in the wake of COVID. I think people should look into that and say, well, why is it so slow there and it's fast here?
Because that inspires lack of confidence in the system, right? When it is so discordant, it's so bad in one state versus another.
Right, and remember, this is not the hanging chads here. This is not the 1940s. So you'd think with technology, as long as it's safe, things would be a little better.
Florida fixed its bad ballots that threw us all into chaos.
We'll never forget.
No, we will not. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was The Debrief, and we'll see you next time.